She did not know who he was. If she had, her hand would have stayed at her side. The old man would have been walked out into the rain, and she would have finished her shift, counted her tips at the bus stop, and gone home to a room with no heat. But she did not know. So, when the man in the charcoal coat spoke to a frightened old dishwasher, as though he were something scraped off a shoe, Verity Sorrel crossed the floor of the most expensive private club in the city and struck him across the face hard enough to turn his head. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of shock, the quiet of men who have just watched somebody walk off a roof. Nobody grabbed her, nobody called the police. The man she had hit only touched his jaw and looked at her. Then he asked for her address. The cormorant did not have a sign. That was the first thing anyone learned about it, and usually the last, because the sort of people who needed a sign never got through the door. It sat at the top of Vestry Hill behind a black lacquered door, with no handle on the outside, and the men who ate there arrived in cars that idled at the curb for hours without anybody writing a ticket. Verity Sorrel had worked the night floor for 2 years and 11 months. She knew the room better than she knew her own face. She knew that the club had 9 tables and that only 7 of them were ever used, because the 2 by the kitchen door were reserved permanently for men who never came. She knew that the sommelier, a nervous man named Otho, wept quietly in the stairwell on Sundays. She knew which of the guests tipped in folded bills and which ones tipped in favors. And she knew which ones you never, under any circumstance, looked directly in the eye. She knew that if you moved through a room slowly enough and quietly enough and kept her hands busy, you became furniture, and furniture was safe. Verity had made herself into furniture on purpose. She was 31 years old. She wore flat black shoes, with a hole worn through the left sole that she had patched twice with rubber and shoe glue. She kept her hair pinned back so tightly that it gave her headaches because loose hair got noticed, and noticed was the opposite of what she wanted. Her hands were the only part of her that gave anything away. The knuckles were cracked from the dish sink, and there was a shine of old burn scar across the inside of her right wrist that she never explained to anybody and that nobody ever asked about. The staff liked her in the flat, uncurious way that people like somebody who never complains. Roz Pike, the floor manager, had said so exactly once, 3 winters ago, on a night when the heat failed and the 2 of them closed the club alone. "You are the only person I have ever met," Roz had said, "who does not want anything." Verity had smiled and said nothing, and gone on stacking the chairs. The truth was that she wanted a great many things. She wanted to sleep for 1 entire day. She wanted to eat a hot meal that she had not lifted off a plate on its way back to the kitchen. She wanted, more than anything else in the world, for it to be the 16th of the month, because the 15th was when Ozias Pell came for the money. She kept the envelope in the lining of her coat, not in a pocket, because pockets could be picked, and not in a bag, because bags could be taken. She had cut a slit in the seam with a paring knife, and she slid the bills in flat, one at a time, until the envelope made a small hard shape against her ribs when she walked. $1,200. It had been her father's debt. That was all anybody had ever explained to her. Corwin Sorrel had been a small man, with a large laugh, who fixed boilers in the buildings down on Caldwell Row, and he had died in the winter of a bad heart and a worse doctor. 11 days after they put him in the ground, a man in a good coat knocked on her door and told her, very politely, that her father had borrowed money from people who did not forget. The man's name was Ozias Pell. He had a soft voice, a wet, patient smile, and hands that were always unaccountably clean. He had shown her a paper with her father's signature on it. She had recognized the signature. That had been enough. She had asked once, at the beginning, whether there was a schedule, whether there was an end. Pell had looked at her with something almost like affection and told her that the debt was to Mr. Corvo, and that Mr. Corvo was a serious man, and that people who asked serious men about schedules generally stopped asking about anything at all. She had never said the name out loud again. She did not know what he looked like. She did not know how old he was, or where he lived, or whether he was one man or a rumor that men like Pell hid behind. She only knew that somewhere above her, there was a man who owned 4 years of her life and who had never once been made to look at her face. She paid. She kept her head down. She counted the days to the 16th. And on the night of the 12th of November, 3 days before the money was due, with $840 sewn into the lining of her coat and a hole in her shoe and no heat in her room, Verity Sorrel carried a tray of untouched oysters back into the kitchen of the Cormorant and heard, through the swinging door, to a sound she had never heard in that building before. She heard a man begging. The kitchen had gone still, not quiet. Kitchens are never quiet. The extractor fan was still dragging its low mechanical groan across the ceiling, and somewhere a pot was boiling over, and nobody was moving to take it off the flame. But the people had gone, still, every one of them, the way animals go, still in a field when something has come over the fence. Verity set the tray down on the pass. At the far end of the kitchen, by the loading door, 3 men in dark coats stood in a loose half-circle, and in the middle of them, on his knees on the wet tile, was Ambrose Fenn. Ambrose had washed dishes at the Cormorant for longer than anybody could remember. He was 73 years old, and he moved through the club like weather, slow and constant and unremarked. He had taught Verity how to open oysters without cutting her thumb. He brought her tea, unasked, on the nights she looked worst, and set it down beside her without a word, and walked away before she could refuse it. He was crying. "Please?" Ambrose said. His voice was thin and wet, and it came apart in the middle of the word. "Please. I did not touch it. I never touched it. I only kept the pages. That is all I ever did." "Get him up," one of the men said. They did not get him up, and then the 4th man came through the loading door, and the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. He was not the biggest man in the kitchen. That was the strange thing, the thing Verity would turn over in her mind for months afterward. He was tall, but not enormous, lean through the shoulders, wearing a charcoal overcoat still beaded with rain, and he moved without any hurry at all. He did not look at the cooks. He did not look at the pot boiling over on the range. He walked to the center of the floor as if it had been cleared for him, which, she realized, it had. He stopped in front of the old man and looked down. "Ambrose," he said. His voice was quiet. Verity had to lean forward to hear it, and hated herself for leaning. "Mr. Corvo," Ambrose whispered. Something cold went down the back of Verity's neck and kept going. "You were told," the man said, "to be out of this building by 11 o'clock. It is now 20 past. Why are you still standing in my kitchen?" "I have nowhere," Ambrose said. "I have nowhere to go. I have this job, and my sister's boy, and if I do not—" "Enough." The word was not shouted. It was set down, the way you set down something heavy. Ambrose stopped talking. The man in the charcoal coat crouched. He did it easily, unhurried, and he brought his face down level with the old man's. And when he spoke again, it was so soft that Verity could only catch the shape of it. "You are an old man with a bad heart and a debt of loyalty to a dead man," he said. "That does not make you useful. It makes you slow, and I do not keep slow things near me." He reached into his coat. Verity's stomach turned over. He took out a folded bank envelope and pushed it into the pocket of the old man's apron with 2 fingers, hard, the way you push a stone into wet ground. "Take it and go," he said. "Walk out that door and get on a bus and do not come back to this hill for any reason ever, for as long as you are alive. Do you understand me? If I see your face in this city again, I will not be able to help you." Ambrose was shaking his head. He was shaking his head and reaching, with both hands, for the hem of the man's coat. "Please," he said. "Please, Mr. Corvo. I have been here 40 years. 40 years. Do not do this to me in front of them. Do not put me out in front of them. Let me finish the night. Let me finish the shift. And I will go quiet in the morning. I will go quiet. I am begging you." The man stood up. He looked down at the old man on the floor of his own kitchen, at the hands still reaching for him, and something moved behind his eyes and was gone before it could be named. And when he spoke, his voice had nothing in it at all. "Marek," he said, "put him in the rain." And that was the moment. That was the moment Verity Sorrel stopped being furniture. She would try, afterward, to explain it to herself. She would tell herself she had not been thinking about the envelope stitched into her coat, or Ozias Pell's clean hands, or 4 years of a debt she had never seen the bottom of. She would tell herself it was only that Ambrose had brought her tea, but the truth was simpler than any of it, and it lived somewhere under her ribs, and it had been waiting 4 years for a door. She crossed the kitchen. Nobody stopped her. She was staff. She was furniture. She was a woman in flat shoes with a hole in the sole, moving through a room full of men, and not one of them turned to look at her until she was already standing in front of him. He looked at her with mild, distant curiosity. "The way you look at a chair that has moved on its own." "Yes," he said, and Verity Sorrel hit him. It was not a good slap. She had never hit anybody in her life. Her arm came up wrong, from the shoulder instead of the hip, and her wrist was loose, and afterward, she would understand that if he had been standing half a step further back, she would have missed him entirely and gone stumbling into his chest like a drunk. But he was not. Her palm caught him flat across the left cheekbone, and the sound of it went through that kitchen like a plate dropped from a height. Flat, wet, obscene. His head turned. Not much. 2 inches, maybe 3. His jaw carried sideways by the weight of it, and a single line of dark hair came loose across his forehead. That was all. He did not stagger. He did not raise a hand. He absorbed her the way a wall absorbs a bird. And then there was no sound in the world at all. The extractor fan was still running. The pot was still boiling over onto the burner, and hissing, and Verity heard none of it, because every man in that kitchen had stopped breathing at the same time, and the silence they made was louder than the fan. Her hand was still up. Her palm was singing, a hot bright stripe of pain from the heel to the fingertips, and she could not seem to make her arm come down. To her left, one of the men in dark coats went for the inside of his jacket. He did not get there. Marek Corvo lifted one finger. Just the index finger of his right hand, barely off his thigh, and the man froze with his hand halfway inside his coat, and Verity understood, in a slow, cold way that had nothing to do with thinking that she had just watched a man's life get handed back to him. Not hers, his. Corvo turned his head back. There was a mark coming up on his cheek, 4 pale bars of finger against the flush, and he did not touch it. He looked at her with an attention so complete that it did not feel like being looked at, it felt like being read. She had time, standing there, to catalog every single thing she had ever owned, and to understand that all of it was gone. The room, the shifts, the envelope in her coat lining, $840, 3 days short. The whole small, grim architecture of her survival, which she had built with her own 2 hands and held up for 4 years by never ever being seen. She had spent 4 years making herself invisible to this man. And she had just walked across a kitchen and put her hand on his face. "Say it," Corvo said. She did not understand. "Whatever you came over here to say," he said. "Say it. You have already done the expensive part." Verity's mouth was dry. When she spoke, her voice came out flat and strange and much steadier than she felt, and she would wonder about that afterward too. "He is 73 years old," she said. Corvo waited. "He has a bad hip and no coat, and it is raining," she said. "And he has washed your dishes for 40 years, and you were going to put him out in the street in front of the people he works with, not because you needed to, because it was faster. Nobody in the kitchen moved. You could have taken him out the front and put him in a car, and nobody would ever have known, and it would have cost you nothing. Nothing. And you did not do it, because it did not occur to you, because he is not a man to you. He is a thing you are finished with. Her voice cracked, finally, on the last word. She hated that. You have his whole life in your pocket, she said, and you could not spare him 5 minutes of dignity in front of a room of dishwashers. The rain went on against the loading door. Emeric Corvo looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he said quite mildly, "What is your name?" She told him. She would never be able to say why. It was the only stupid thing she did that night, and she did it without hesitation, the way you answer a doctor. He repeated it once, under his breath, as though setting it somewhere he could find it later. Then he stepped around her. That was all. He did not have her held. He did not have her removed. He walked past her, as if she had finished saying something at a meeting, and he crossed the kitchen to where Ambrose Fenn was still kneeling on the wet tile with his hands over his face. He crouched. "Get up," Corvo said. Ambrose did not move. "Ambrose, get up off the floor." The old man lifted his head. His beard was soaked through. His eyes had that terrible loose wetness of a man who has already accepted the worst and is only waiting for it to be administered. Corvo took him under the arm and brought him up. He straightened the old man's apron with 2 fingers, an oddly precise little gesture, and he did not look at anybody else in that kitchen while he did it. "You will go out the front," Corvo said quietly. "Marek will take you in the gray car. You will be driven to the station and you will not carry anything yourself." Ambrose made a small, broken sound. "Do not thank me," Corvo said. "This is not mercy. This is a correction." And then he turned and walked out through the loading door into the rain, without looking back at any of them, and the door swung shut, and the kitchen of the Cormorant exhaled all at once like a lung. Somebody took the pot off the fire. Verity stood exactly where she was. She could not make herself move. Her hand had begun to shake, a fine tremor that started in the fingers and worked up into her forearm, and she pressed the palm flat against her thigh to stop it, and it did not stop. Roz Pike arrived from somewhere with her face the color of paper. "Get your coat," Roz said. "Roz, get your coat, Verity." There was something in the manager's voice that Verity had never heard before, and when she identified it, her stomach went to water. It was grief. Roz was talking to her the way you talk to somebody who has just been given a diagnosis. Verity got her coat. She went down the service stair, past Otho, who was standing in the cellar doorway, and who did not look at her, and out through the alley door into the rain. Nobody had grabbed her. That was the thing. She turned it over and over, walking down Vestry Hill, with the rain coming sideways into her face. Nobody had put a hand on her or asked her a single question. She had assaulted a man in front of 9 witnesses and had been permitted to collect her coat and walk out. Ordinary people would have called the police. Dangerous people would have hurt her in the kitchen. He had done neither, and she did not know what the 3rd category was, and the not knowing crawled. At the bottom of the hill, she stopped under a streetlight and looked at her own hand. The palm was still red. She could see the shape of it, faintly, the memory of his cheekbone printed into her skin. She thought about the man reaching into his coat and stopping, mid-reach, because of one finger. She thought about Ozias Pell's soft voice saying that Mr. Corvo was a serious man, and she had to put her hand flat against the wet brick of a shop front for a moment and breathe. She did not sleep that night. She lay on her mattress with her coat still on, because the coat was warmer than the blanket, and waited for footsteps on the stair. None came. None came the next night either. And on the 3rd night, the night of the 15th of November, Verity Sorrel came home from a shift she was somehow still working, and climbed 4 flights in the dark and found her door standing open. The room was empty. She stood in the doorway, with her keys in her fist and the blood going out of her face, and the room looked back, and there was nobody in it. Nothing had been taken. She knew that immediately, because there had been almost nothing to take. The mattress, the 2 crates, the kettle, the photograph of her father in the plastic frame, with the crack across one corner, still standing on the window ledge. Nothing was gone. Something had been added. On the crate she used as a table, squared up neatly against the edge, was a brown paper package tied with string. Verity shut the door and put her back against it, and looked at the package from across the room, the way you look at something that might go off. Then she opened it, standing up, with her coat still on, with her fingers so unsteady that she tore the paper instead of untying the string. Inside was a pair of shoes. They were black and flat and plain, and they were the exact size of her foot, and the soles were thick and whole and unworn, and she knew before she even touched them that they had cost more than she made in 3 weeks. There was no note. Verity sat down on the mattress very slowly, with the shoes in her lap. She did not cry. She wanted to. She sat there in her wet coat and understood, with absolute clarity, that she was being told something, and that she did not have the language to read it, and that this was worse than a threat, because a threat she would have understood. He had been in this room, or he had sent somebody into it. Somebody had stood where she was sitting and looked at the mattress, and looked at her father's photograph on the window ledge with the crack across the corner, and looked at the hole in the sole of the shoe she was still wearing, and had gone away again and come back with this. He had seen how she lived. She put the shoes back in the paper, and pushed the package under the mattress, and went and stood at the window with her arms crossed hard over her chest. Down in the street, on the far corner, under the broken streetlight, a gray car was parked with its engine off. It was there the next morning. It was there when she came back from her shift at 4, and it was there at noon, and it was there on the 17th, and by then she had stopped pretending she did not see it. Nobody ever got out of it. That was the part that took her apart. If a man had gotten out and followed her, she would have known what was happening. She would have been frightened in a way that had a name, but nobody got out. The car simply sat, where it sat, in the rain and out of it. And once, at 3 in the morning, she saw the small orange coal of a cigarette moving behind the windscreen, and understood that whoever was in there was not sleeping either. She stopped eating. The food went through the pass under her nose 400 times a night, and she could not put any of it in her mouth, and by the 17th, she was so light-headed on the floor that she had to hold the back of a chair to keep from going down, and Roz took one look at her and sent her to sit in the cellar. Otho found her down there with her head between her knees. He poured a splash of something out of a bottle that was not for guests, put the glass on the step beside her, and sat down 2 steps up. "You should not have done it," he said. "I know." "No." Otho's voice was strange. "You do not know. That is what is frightening about you." Verity lifted her head. "I have worked in that room 11 years, Otho said. "I have seen men taken out through the loading door, and I have never once been told where they went, and I have never seen anybody touch him. You put your hand on his face, in front of his own people, and he asked you your name." "He gave me shoes," Verity said. Otho went very still. Then he stood up and picked up the glass she had not touched, and carried it away with him, and he did not speak to her again for a week. The 15th of November had come and gone. She had noticed it, distantly, the way you notice a bird hitting a window. She had $840 sewn into her coat, and $360 that she did not have, and she had lain awake on the night of the 15th with the money in her hands, and her chest so tight she could not get a full breath, waiting for the knock. Ozias Pell had not come. He had not come on the 16th either, or the 17th. In 4 years Ozias Pell had never once been late. He had come in blizzards. He had come the week her father died, and stood in the doorway with his hat in his clean hands, and told her he was very sorry for her loss. And then he had counted the money. He was not coming. Somebody had told him not to. And on the evening of the 18th of November, as Verity Sorrel was walking up Vestry Hill in the dark in a coat with $840 in the lining and a pair of unworn shoes at home that she had not touched since the night they arrived. The gray car pulled slowly out of its space behind her. The rear window came down. And the inside of the car was warm and dark and smelled of leather and cold rain, and Emmerich Corvo was sitting on the far side of it, with a folded newspaper on his knee that he was not reading. "Get in," he said. "You are soaked." Verity did not get in. She stood on the pavement in the November dark with the rain running off the end of her nose, and she looked at him, and she found, to her own distant astonishment, that she was not frightened. She had been frightened for 6 days. She had used all of it up. "I am not getting into your car," she said. Corvo considered this. "No," he said. "I suppose you are not." He set the newspaper aside. "Why did you not wear the shoes?" "Because I do not know what they cost," Verity said. Something happened in his face then. It was very small, and it was gone almost at once, and afterward, she was not certain she had seen it at all. "They cost nothing," he said. "Everything costs something," Verity said. "That is the only thing I have ever learned. A man came to my door 4 years ago with a piece of paper and a soft voice, and told me my father owed money, and I have been paying it every month since, and I have never once seen the bottom of it. So, no, Mr. Corvo. I am not going to put on a pair of shoes that came out of nowhere and pretend that is a kindness. Tell me what they cost, or take them back." The rain went on. "Say that again," Corvo said. She frowned. "Say what?" "The debt," he said. "Say it again, slowly." And something in the way he said it went through her like cold water. Verity said carefully, "My father was Corwin Sorrel. He fired boilers on Caldwell Row. He died 4 years ago in the winter, and 11 days after we buried him, a man named Ozias Pell came to my door and told me that my father had borrowed money from people who do not forget. He said, the debt was to you. He has come on the 15th of every month for 4 years, and I have paid him $1,200 every single time." Silence in the car. "He has not come this month," she said, "and I want to know why. Because, whatever the reason is, I think I am going to have to pay for it." Emmerich Corvo did not move. He sat entirely still in the dark of that car for long enough that she began to think he had stopped listening, and when he finally spoke, his voice had changed, and she did not have a name for what it had changed into. "Go home," he said. "Lock your door, do not open it for anybody, including me." Then the window went up and the car pulled away from the curb and left her standing in the rain. He did not go back to the club. Merrick Vidra drove, and Corvo sat in the back, with the newspaper still folded on the seat beside him, and his hands flat on his knees, and he said, without turning his head, "Who is Ozias Pell?" Merrick's eyes came up in the mirror. "Collections," he said. "West Side. He has been with the house 12 years. He was Mr. Drock's man before he was anybody's. And what does he collect?" "Debts," Merrick said slowly. "Whose?" There was a pause of exactly the wrong length. "Yours," Marek said. Corvo turned his head and looked out of the window. That was the question. That was all it was. 11 words in the back of a car, on a wet Tuesday, spoken quietly to one man he trusted, and it went out of that car and into the house and down through the house, the way water goes down through a building, finding every crack. And it arrived, 4 floors below him, in the hands of somebody who had been waiting 11 years for exactly that question to be asked. He would understand that later. He did not understand it then. It took him 4 days. 4 days of asking men who had worked for him for a decade what the collections book looked like, and being told, with great courtesy, that the collections book was not something that came upstairs. 4 days of discovering that there was not one door in his own house that opened when he pushed it, and that he had never noticed, because he had never pushed. On the evening of the 22nd he sat alone, with a glass he had not drunk from, and understood that the rot was not in a man, it was in the architecture. And on the morning of the 23rd, Emeric Corvo, told Marek Vidra to drive him to Caldwell Row. The car came down off Vestry Hill, and the city changed around them, and he watched it change. He had grown up on the other side of that change, and he had spent 20 years climbing away from it, and the streets came up to meet him one after another, like people he had failed to recognize. The glass fronts of the hill gave way to shuttered pharmacies with grills across the windows. The grills gave way to plywood. Caldwell Row was a long, wet, sagging street of walk-ups with their gutters hanging off, and there was a mattress in the road, and the streetlight on the corner had been shot out or thrown out, or simply left to die. He knew this street. That was the thing, he knew it in his teeth. There had been a boiler man on Caldwell Row when he was young. A small man with a large laugh, who came out at 2 in the morning in his slippers in a January freeze because a building full of people had no heat, and who never charged anybody who could not pay. Corvo sat in the car outside number 41 and did not get out for a while. He had never asked what happened to that man. He had been busy. He had been becoming somebody. And somewhere in the long years of it he had stopped looking at the bottom of his own house. And other men had noticed, and had built things down there in the dark. He got out of the car. He went up 4 flights of a stairwell that smelled of damp and old cooking, and stopped on the 4th floor. The door of the room at the end was standing open. There was a handprint on the frame, at the height of a woman's shoulder, and it was red, and it was not fresh. He did not call out. Emeric Corvo had learned to read a room from the doorway, and this one told him there had been a fight, and that it had been short, and that it had not gone the way the man who started it expected. The crates were overturned. One was broken clean through the slats. There was a kettle on the floor with its cord ripped out of the wall, and the flex was wound twice around itself in a way that flex does not wind by falling. And there was blood on the linoleum in a wide, dragging arc that led away from the door and toward the back of the room. Not a spatter, a smear. Somebody had gone down and gotten up again. The photograph of the boiler man was face down on the window ledge, and the plastic frame was cracked across the middle now, instead of the corner. Corvo stepped inside, and the boards took his weight with a long groan, and a voice came out of the dark at the back of the room, dry as paper. "You are standing on the only dry part of the floor," it said. "If you would move, I would rather not have to mop." He found her behind the mattress. She had dragged it up on its side, and wedged it across the corner between the wall and the radiator, and she was sitting on the floor behind it, with her back against the cold iron, and she had her coat off, for the first time since he had known her, and Emeric Corvo, who had watched men die at arm's length, and gone on to eat his dinner, felt something in his chest go straight through the floor. She was holding her side, both hands pressed flat, low down on the left, and the shirt under her hands was not white anymore, and it had gone through the shirt and through the waistband of her skirt, and it was running down into the seam of the boards and pooling there, black, in the dark. Beside her on the floor, laid out on a dish towel, with the neatness of a surgeon's tray, were a sewing needle, a spool of black thread, a bottle of clear spirit with the cap off, and a paring knife. The needle had been threaded. Her hands were shaking so violently that she had not been able to use it. "Do not," she said. Corvo had said nothing. "Do not look at me like that," she said. "I know what your face is doing. Everybody's face does that. And then they call somebody, and somebody official arrives and asks questions, and I cannot afford questions. So if you are going to be useful, and if you are not, go and stand in the hall." It was the same voice she used to tell. A table that the oysters were finished. Corvo crossed the room. He went down on one knee beside her on the wet boards, and his coat went straight into the blood, and he did not notice, and would not have cared. "Move your hands," he said. "No, Verity." "If I move my hands," she said, through her teeth, "I do not think they are going back." He moved them for her. She made a sound, then, that he would hear for the rest of his life. And she turned her face into the radiator, and bit down on the sleeve of her own arm, and Corvo lifted the ruined shirt away from her side and looked at what was underneath, and for 4 full seconds he did not breathe. It was not a stab. He had expected a stab, and it was not one. Somebody had opened her along the ribs with something short and serrated, a kitchen thing, dragged rather than driven, and the wound was shallow at the front and deep at the back, where the hand had pulled through, and the edges were black and crusted and wrong, and rising off it unmistakable was the sweet rotten smell of a wound that had been left. "This is 4 days old," Corvo said. Verity said nothing. Her eyes were glassy, and her lips had gone the color of ash, and there was a heat coming off her skin that he could feel from 6 inches away. "You have been working," he said. "You have been carrying trays up and down a staircase for 4 days with this." "I need the money," she said. He had killed men for less than the thing that happened in his chest at that moment. "Who?" he said. Verity turned her head. She looked at him for a long moment, and there was something almost like pity in it, and it was the pity that undid him, because it was the same pity that Ambrose Fenn had aimed at him from the floor of his own kitchen, and he had not understood it then either. "Oh, Zaius Pell," she said. Corvo went very still. "He came on the 19th, she said. 4 days late. He did not come for the money. That is what I want you to understand. I had the money in my hand, and I held it out to him, and he did not look at it. He said, 'You have been talking to people you should not talk to.' And I said I had not talked to anybody. And he said, 'You put your hand on the wrong face, girl, and now you are a loose end.'" She swallowed. "I got the flex around his neck," she said. "I do not know how. I got him down, and I ran, and he caught me in the doorway, and he did this, and I got the door shut on his arm and put the bolt across and sat against it until morning." Corvo said nothing at all. The 19th was the morning after he had asked Mark Vidra a question in the back of a car. "He has not come back," she said, "but he will. He is a patient man. He has always been a patient man. He waits 4 years for money in the rain. He can wait a week for this." She was starting to shiver. She looked down at her own hands, which were red to the wrist, and then she looked at the needle on the dish towel that she had not been able to hold. "I could not make my fingers do it," she said. And for the first time that night, her voice broke, and she sounded like a woman of 31 years old, sitting on the floor of an unheated room, with a knife wound in her side. "I have been trying for 4 days. I could not make my fingers do it." Emmerich Corvo took off his coat. He put it around her shoulders, and he took the needle up off the towel, and he found that his own hand was not entirely steady either, and he had not known that his hand could do that. Then he said quietly, "Where is the tin?" Verity looked up. "You have been paying a debt for 4 years, he said, "to a man who came every month and never gave you anything, except that he did. Men like Pal always give a receipt, because a receipt is a leash. It tells you that you are still on the hook, and it makes you grateful for the paper. And you are the most careful person I have ever met in my life." Her jaw moved. "You kept them," he said. "Where is the tin?" "Verity." She closed her eyes. "Under the 3rd board from the window," she said. It was a biscuit tin, with a picture of a lighthouse on the lid. Corvo pried up the board with the paring knife and lifted the tin out and set it on the floor between them, and Verity watched him do it without moving, because there was nothing left in her to stop him with. He took the lid off. Inside, banded in bundles of 12, with elastic hair ties, were 47 slips of paper. They were about the size of a bus ticket. Each one had a printed line for a date and a printed line for an amount, and each had been filled out in the same small, neat, backward-sloping hand, and each was stamped at the bottom in blue ink with a mark that Emeric Corvo had seen every day of his adult life. It was the mark of the house, his father's mark. 2 crossed keys, received on account. The slip said, "In good faith, with thanks." He went through them, one at a time. He laid them out on the dry boards in 4 long rows in date order, and Verity lay against the radiator, with his coat around her, and watched him do it, and neither of them said anything for a very long time. 47 slips. 4 years, less 1 month. $56,400. I did not authorize this, Corvo said. Verity laughed. It was a terrible laugh, thin and wet, and it ended in a cough that folded her forward over her own side. Of course you did, she said. Your name is on it. I have been holding your name in my hands on the 15th of every month for 4 years. That is my father's stamp, Corvo said. My father has been dead 11 years. That stamp sits in a drawer in a house on Vestry Hill, and there are exactly 2 men alive who have a key to that drawer, and one of them is me. The room was very quiet. Verity lifted her head. And the other one, she said. Emmerich Corvo sat back on his heels on the floor of a freezing room on Caldwell Row, surrounded by 4 years of a woman's life, laid out in rows, and he said, a name, Casimir Drock. He did not say it loudly. He said it the way a man says the name of an illness he has just been told he has had for some time. He was my father's consigliere, Corvo said. He carried me on his shoulders at my christening. When my father died, he sat with me for 3 nights and told me which men would try to take the house from me, and he was right about every one of them, and I have not questioned a word he has said to me in 11 years. He looked down at the slips. He runs collections. He ran them for my father, and he has run them for me, and it never once occurred to me to take them back, because it is beneath me, and it bores me, and I said so, in this exact language, at a table in front of him. In 11 years, he said, I have never opened that book, not once. You never looked, Verity said. No, not once. In 11 years. No, Corvo said, not once. She closed her eyes. Then you should know, she said, that my father did not borrow anything. Corvo raised his head. He was not a gambler, Verity said. He was not a drinker. He was a boiler man, with 1 suit and a savings account, with $411 in it, and I have his papers, every scrap, and there is nothing, there is no loan, there has never been a loan. The only thing I have ever found with your family's name anywhere near it is a receipt from 1989 for a job he did on a boiler in a building your father owned, which he was paid for in cash, and which he wrote down in his own hand. She opened her eyes. I did not pay because I believed it, she said. I want you to understand that. I paid because Ozias Pell showed me a paper with my father's signature on it, and my father had been dead 11 days, and I was 27 years old, and there was a man in a good coat standing in my doorway telling me what serious men do to people who ask questions. She looked at him. I paid because I was afraid of you, she said. And you did not even know I existed. Emmerich Corvo did not answer that. There was nothing in the language to answer it with. He picked up the first slip in the first row. The oldest one. The date on it was the 15th of December. 4 years passed, and the amount was $1,200, and the hand that had written it was small and neat, and it sloped backward. And then he stopped. He held it up to the gray light from the window, and he turned it, and he looked at the back of it, and Verity saw his shoulders change. What? She said. There is a number, Corvo said. He went through the others fast now, flipping each one over, and on the back of every single slip, in pencil, in the top right corner, was a 3-digit number, and the numbers did not match the dates, and they did not match the amounts, and they climbed, month by month, in a sequence that made no sense at all, unless you knew what you were looking at. It is a ledger line, Corvo said. His voice had gone strange. He is not just taking the money, he is booking it. He is putting every dollar into a second book, and a book has to be somewhere, and it has to be somewhere he can reach, and I cannot. He looked up at her. Verity, he said. On the night you hit me, what did the old man say? She was very cold now, and it was getting hard to hold on to a thought. He said he did not touch it. She said what else? He said, I only kept the pages. Emmerich Corvo closed his eyes. Ambrose Fenn, he said, has washed dishes in the basement of that club for 40 years. He was my father's man before he was anybody's. And 12 days ago, Casimir Drock came to me, and told me, with a great deal of regret, that the old dishwasher had been seen talking to the Halloran family, and that he was a liability, and that it would be a kindness if he were removed from the building quietly, before anybody else made the decision for us. His mouth twisted. I thought I was saving his life, he said. I put money in his apron, and I put him in a car, and I sent him out of the city on a train, and I did it in front of my whole kitchen because I wanted every man in that room to see that he was cast out, so that when Drock's people went looking for him they would go looking somewhere else. He opened his eyes, and a waitress hit me in the face for it, he said, because from where she was standing, it looked exactly like what it looked like. Verity stared at him. He is not a liability, Corvo said quietly. He is a witness. He kept the pages. He has been keeping the pages since before I was old enough to shave, because my father told him to keep them. And Casimir Drock has just spent a fortnight trying to get him out of this city and under a train. He got to his feet. And I helped, he said. Where? Verity said. Her voice was barely there. Where did you send him? He is not on the train, Corvo said. Marek put him in a room above a bakery on Holloway Street and has been feeding him twice a day for 11 days, because I do not trust anybody, including myself, and because I have learned to keep the things I throw away where I can find them. He looked down at her. Which means, he said, that as of this moment, there are 2 people alive in this city who can put Casimir Drock in the ground. He crouched. He gathered the 47 slips carefully back into the tin. And one of them, he said, is bleeding to death on the floor in front of me. He carried her nowhere. That was the first thing she made clear. And she made it clear with her hand, fisted in the front of his shirt, and her voice gone down to almost nothing, and it took him a moment to understand what she was refusing. No, doctor, she said. You have a septic wound. No, doctor, Verity said. No hospital, no house, no car, no men. I do not know who is yours. You do not know who is yours. You have just told me that you have not looked at your own books in 11 years, and I have 4 days of a fever, telling me that the only person in this city who has not tried to kill me yet is the man I hit in the face. Her grip tightened. You do it, she said. Here, now. And then we go and get the old man. Emmerich Corvo held her eyes until she looked away first. Then he stood up and went out into the hall and told Marek Vidra to bring the bag from the car, and to bring water, and to bring every lamp he could find in the building, and to stand at the bottom of the stairwell and let nobody up it. Marek went without a word. The lamps came, 4 of them, all mismatched, dragged out of the rooms of neighbors who asked no questions, because the man asking was 240 pounds and did not smile. Corvo set them in a half circle, and the room filled with a hard yellow light that showed everything, and Verity, seeing her own room properly lit for the first time in a year, closed her eyes. Do not look at it, she said. I have seen worse rooms, Corvo said. Not while the person who lives in it was watching you. He did not answer that. He rolled his sleeves to the elbow. He washed his hands twice in the cold tap, scrubbing under the nails with the harsh green soap she used on the floors, and he laid out what he had on the dish towel, and it was not much. A curved needle, suture thread, iodine, a dressing pack, 2 vials of an antibiotic that Marek's cousin was not supposed to have, and a syringe. This is going to be bad, he said. Verity took hold of the radiator with both hands. Is it going to be quick? She said. No. Then, stop talking about it. He cleaned the wound first, and that was the worst part, worse than the needle, because cleaning it meant going into it, and the thing had been closed on the outside and rotten underneath for 4 days, and it had to come open again before it could be shut. She did not scream. He had expected screaming, and he did not get it. She went rigid and white, and made a low, continuous sound in the back of her throat that was somehow far worse, and her forehead came down on the iron of the radiator, and she held it there and did not let go and did not stop him. Twice, he had to stop himself. The needle was easier. He had done it before, in worse light, on men who deserved it less. He drove it through the lip of the wound and drew the thread and set the knot and moved on, and he found that he was counting, and that he did not want to reach the end of the counting, because then he would have to look at her face. "You are slow," Verity said, through her teeth. "I am careful, you are slow," she said. "And you are leaving too much space between them, and it is going to scar like a railway line." Corvo's hand stopped. Then, without looking up, he said, "Would you like to do it yourself?" "I would," she said. "I would like that very much. Unfortunately, my hands are not working, which is the entire reason you are still in my room." He almost laughed. He was appalled to find that he almost laughed. He went back to work, and he pulled the next stitch closer to the last one, and she made a small, satisfied noise that under any other circumstance he would have found intolerable. And it was while he was working, with the lamps burning, and the rain going on against the window, and her breath coming shallow and fast against his forearm, that he began to see the rest of her. He had not been looking. There had been too much blood to look. Now, he saw the old burn on the inside of her right wrist, a wide, flat shine of scar tissue that he had assumed, from across a room, was a kitchen accident, and which he understood, now up close, was the shape of a hand. He saw the ridged nail on the middle finger of her left hand grown back wrong over an old bed, the way a nail grows back when it has been taken off. He saw that she weighed almost nothing, and that every one of these things had happened to her in the 4 years that Ozias Pell had been climbing her stairs on the 15th of the month, with his clean hands and his soft voice and a piece of paper with 2 crossed keys on it. His father's keys. Corvo tied the last stitch. He cut the thread. He put his hands flat on his own knees and looked at the floor for a while. "You are angry," Verity said. "I am not angry. Your hands are shaking." Emmerich Corvo looked at his hands. "Yes," he said, "they are." He reached over and took the syringe, and found the vein in the crook of her arm, and pushed the antibiotic into it slowly. Then he sat back on the wet boards of a stranger's room in the worst street in the city, in a shirt that would never come clean, and he said the only true thing he had left. "I have been eating dinner in a room above you for 4 years," he said, "and you have been paying for it." The room above the bakery on Holloway Street was warm. That was the first thing Verity registered when Merrick carried her up the back stair, and she registered it with a kind of animal shock, because she had not been properly warm indoors since her father died. The heat came up through the floorboards from the ovens below, and the room smelled of yeast and scorched sugar, and there was a brass bed against one wall with a quilt on it, a chair, and a small table with a lamp. Ambrose Fenn was sitting at the table with a cup of tea in front of him. He stood up so fast that he knocked the chair over. "Oh," he said. "Oh no. No, no." He came across that room faster than a man of 73 should have been able to, and took Verity's face in both of his old hands, and looked at her, and then looked past her at Emmerich Corvo in the doorway, and Verity watched the gentlest man she had ever known turn on the most dangerous man in the city with his fist closed. "What you did," Ambrose said. "What did you do to her?" "He did not do it," Verity said. "You said," Ambrose said, and his voice was cracking, "you said that if I went quiet, nobody else would get hurt. Mr. Corvo, you looked at me on that floor, and you said that." Ambrose Corvo said, "It was Pell." The old man stopped. The room went very still. Downstairs, faintly, somebody slid a tray into an oven. Ambrose Fenn sat down slowly on the edge of the brass bed with the quilt on it, and he put his face in his hands, and he said, into them, "I told him. I told your father. I told him 20 years ago that Casimir was writing things down twice." Corvo crossed the room and crouched in front of him. "Tell me about the pages," he said. And so, at 2 o'clock in the morning, an old dishwasher told the head of the house what the house had been doing. There were 2 books. There had always been 2 books. There was the book that came up to the desk on Vestry Hill, which was the truth as Emmerich Corvo understood it. And there was the second book, which lived in the strong room under the wine cellar of the Cormorant, behind a door that only the consigliere held the code to, and which contained the names of 410 people who did not exist. Ghost debts, Ambrose said. He said it the way a man says the name of a disease. They pick the ones with nobody, he said. Widows, old men, families with no papers. A man dies, and Casimir gets to the family before the ground is even hard, and Pell knocks on the door with a piece of paper, and they pay. Because who would they tell? He looked up. Your father caught him at it in the winter of '96, Ambrose said. He put a stop to it, and he took the second book away, and he gave it to me. Because I was nobody. Because I was a man who washed dishes. And he said, Ambrose, keep the pages, and if I die, and Casimir starts again, you bring them out. He wiped his face with the flat of his hand. And then your father died, he said. And Casimir started again, inside a fortnight. And I was frightened, and I have sat on those pages for 11 years, and washed dishes, and every 15th of the month I have lain in my bed and thought about the people upstairs. Nobody spoke. They are here, Ambrose said, the old pages. I have had them under my mattress, in every room I have ever slept in, since your father put them in my hands. He got up and went to the bed, and he pulled the mattress back, and underneath it, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a bootlace, was a ledger with a green cloth cover, and he lifted it out and held it against his chest for a moment before he could make himself hand it over. Emeric Corvo took it. He set it on the table under the lamp and he opened it, and he began to read, and Verity, from the chair where they had put her, watched his face while he did it, and she saw the last 11 years of his life fall out from under him page by page. He read for 40 minutes. He did not speak once. Then he closed the book and stood up and said, Marek, bring the car around. And Verity said, no. Every head in the room turned. She was gray. She was propped in a chair with a blanket over her knees and 15 stitches in her side, and she could not have stood up unassisted if the building had been on fire, and she said it again. No. Verity, Corvo said, and there was warning in it. That book is 11 years old, she said. He stopped. It ends in the winter your father died, she said. It proves what Casimir Drock was doing then. It does not prove one single thing that he has done since. And I would like you to think, Mr. Corvo, before you take it into a room full of your own men, about what happens when he looks at 11-year-old pages in a dead man's handwriting and says very calmly in front of everybody that his enemies have forged a book. Silence. He has 47 of my slips, she said. 47 pieces of paper in his own hand, with numbers on the back of them that tie straight into whatever he has been keeping in that strong room for 11 years. He does not know I kept them. He does not know they exist, because he has never once in 4 years imagined that a waitress in a room with no heat would be careful. She lifted her chin. Your book is history, she said. My tin is evidence. And they only work together. Corvo stared at her. Then give me the tin, he said. No, Verity. I am not letting that tin out of my hands, she said, and I am not staying in this room. Now he did come toward her, and he came fast, and he put one hand on each arm of her chair and brought his face down level with hers, and Marek looked at the ceiling, and Ambrose looked at his shoes. You have a hole in your side, Corvo said very quietly. Yes. You cannot walk. I can be carried. You have been waiting to carry me since the moment you came through my door. You will be standing in a room with the man who sent Ozias Pell up your stairs with a knife. Yes, Verity said. Why, he said. Give me one reason. One. Why would you put yourself in that room? And Verity Sorrel, 31 years old, with 15 stitches in her ribs, and a fever climbing back up through her like a tide, looked the head of the house in the eye and said the truest thing she had ever said out loud. Because if I am not in that room, she said, then I am a piece of paper. Corvo did not move. That is what I have been for 4 years, she said. A number on the back of a slip. That is all I was to Pell and to Drock, and that is all I would have been to you, if I had not lost my temper in your kitchen. And now you are going to go and take my life back from me. And if I am not standing there when you do it, then I am still only a thing that was done to. And I will be a thing that was done to for the rest of my life. Her voice did not rise. I have paid $56,400, she said. I have earned the room. The lamp hissed. Emmerich Corvo straightened up very slowly. And then, he did something that neither Marek Vidra nor Ambrose Fenn had ever seen him do, in 11 years and in 40 years respectively, and which they would both, separately and privately, remember until they died. He inclined his head. Not much. 2 inches, maybe 3. Then get the shoes, he said. The cormorant did not have a sign. It had a black lacquered door with no handle on the outside, and on the night of the 24th of November, that door was opened from within at 10 minutes past 1 in the morning, and the men, standing in the rain outside, came in without knocking the water off their coats. There were 19 of them. They came up the stairs and through the dining room, and they did not touch the tables, and they took the doors, all of them, and they did it in under 90 seconds, and nobody in the building fired a shot because there was nobody left in the building to fire one. Marek Vidra had spent the previous 4 hours on the telephone. He had not been persuading anybody. He had been counting. Casimir Drach was sitting at table 7. He was 79 years old. A small, dry, immaculate man, with white hair combed straight back, and a cane with a silver head that he did not need, eating a plate of sole with a napkin tucked into his collar, and he did not stop eating when the doors opened. He finished the mouthful. He set his knife down. Then he looked up and saw Emmerich Corvo standing in the middle of his dining room in a shirt with dried blood on the cuffs, and he saw Marek Vidra behind him, and he saw the 19 men, and, last of all, he saw the woman. She was standing on her own 2 feet. That was the thing that Ambrose Fenn, watching from the kitchen door, would talk about for the rest of his life. She had her left arm across her middle, holding her side, and she was white to the lips, and her whole body was shaking with the effort of it, and she had one hand on the back of a chair, but she was standing, and she was wearing a pair of new black shoes. Casimir Drach dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Emmerich, he said, sit down, you look terrible. Corvo did not sit down. He walked to the table and took the green ledger from under his arm and set it on the white cloth beside the plate, and Casimir Drach looked at the green cover for perhaps 2 full seconds. Then he sighed. Ah, he said. He picked up his wine. I told your father to burn that, he said. I told him. I said, Aurelio, a book is a rope, and one day somebody is going to hang somebody with it, and I would rather it were not me. And he laughed at me. He was a sentimental man, your father. He kept things. He drank. That book is 11 years old, he said, comfortably. It is written in a dead man's hand. It was pulled out from under a mattress, and it was brought to you by a dishwasher who was seen last week taking money from the Halloran family, which I can prove, and which I have 3 men prepared to say to your face tonight. He set the glass down. Whatever else you may believe about me, believe that I have been protecting the name of this house since before you could read. Sit down, Emmerich. You are tired, and you have been listening to frightened people. And it would have worked. Verity understood that with absolute clarity, standing there with her hand white on the back of the chair. Casimir Drach had been the calmest voice in Emmerich Corvo's life for 11 years, and the old man was not lying badly, he was lying beautifully, and a man who has never opened his own books does not know how to argue with the man who keeps them. It would have worked on a book. It did not work on a tin. Verity let go of the chair. She walked 4 steps across the floor of a dining room she had crossed 10,000 times with a tray in her hands, and it cost her more than anything ever had, and she put the biscuit tin with the lighthouse on the lid down on the white cloth next to the green ledger. Casimir Drach looked at the tin. Something went out of his face. She took the lid off. She turned it over and poured 47 slips of paper out onto the tablecloth, and they fanned across the linen and slid into the sauce, and lay there small and gray and creased, from 4 years in the lining of a woman's coat. Verity Sorrel put one finger on the topmost slip and turned it over. 941, she said. The old man's hand had stopped halfway to his glass. 942, she said, turning the next. 943. 944. She looked up. Those are your line numbers, she said. Those are the lines in the second book. They run from 941 to 987. One for every month I paid. And they are in your handwriting, and they are on the back of 47 receipts, stamped with a dead man's keys. And there is a strong room under this building, with a door that only you have the code to, and in about 4 minutes it is going to be opened. She leaned on the table. And when they open it, she said, and they take out the book you have been keeping since the year Emmerich's father died, and they turn to line 941, they are going to find my father's name. Silence. Corwin Sorrel, she said. Boiler man? Caldwell Row. Her voice cracked finally, and she did not care. He never borrowed anything from anybody in his life, she said. He went out at 2 in the morning in the snow for people who could not pay him, and you put his name in a book because he was dead, and I was 27, and there was nobody, and then you sent a man to my door for 4 years. And when I finally made a noise, you sent him back to open me up on my own floor. She straightened. I am line 987, she said. My name is Verity Sorrel. Say it. Casimir Drac did not say it. He sat at table 7 with his napkin tucked into his collar, and his soul going cold in front of him, and he looked, for the first time in his life, old. Emeric, he said. Corvo did not answer. Emeric, I built this. Your father was a butcher, with a temper, and I made him. A businessman, I made you. I sat with you for 3 nights. You told me which men would betray me, Corvo said. Yes. He looked down at him. You told me every name but one, he said. The old man's mouth moved. You have taken money, Corvo said, in my name and in my dead father's name, from 410 people who had nobody. You did it for 11 years, while I sat upstairs and ate my dinner and called it beneath me. You made my name into a thing that gets used to frighten women in doorways. He put one hand flat on the tablecloth, and when a waitress came too close to it, he said, You did not come to me. You sent Ozias Pell to a room on Caldwell Row with a kitchen knife. Casimir Drac reached very slowly for his cane. Marek Vidra put a hand on it. Corvo, the old man said, and his voice had changed now. It had gone up half an octave, and there was something in it that had not been there in 11 years. Emmerich, look at me. Look at what you are doing. You are doing this for a waitress. A girl who carries plates. You are going to open the throat of the man who raised you for a girl who carries plates. Emmerich Corvo looked at Verity Sorrel. She was still standing. She had her hand on the table, and her whole side was soaking through the coat he had put on her, and she was standing. She is not a girl who carries plates, Corvo said. He turned back. She is the only person in this house who could read your handwriting. They took him out through the kitchen, past the pass and the sinks and the extractor fan, past the exact square of wet tile where a 73-year-old man had knelt with his hands over his face. The Casimir Drac did not go quietly, and at the loading door he twisted around and looked back into the room, one last time. Ambrose Fenn was standing by the dish sink with a towel over his shoulder. The old dishwasher looked at the old consigliere for a long moment, then he took the towel off his shoulder and folded it, and set it on the edge of the sink, and turned his back, and began, very calmly, to wash a plate. The loading door closed. Ozias Pell was found the following morning in the room above his mother's shop, with his suitcase packed and his ticket bought and his clean hands folded in his lap. What happened to him was quick. It was not discussed. Verity Sorrel never asked. She had asked for one thing, and only one. She had asked to be told when it was finished. And at 4 in the morning, in a warm room above a bakery on Holloway Street, with an old man asleep in a chair beside her and a lamp burning low, Emeric Corvo came up the back stair and stood in the doorway with the reins still on his shoulders. Verity opened her eyes. He nodded once. And she turned her face into the pillow and cried for 11 minutes without making a single sound. The way a person cries who has spent 4 years teaching herself not to. And Emeric Corvo sat down on the floor with his back against the door, and waited, and did not touch her, and did not leave. She was ill for 19 days. The fever came back that first night, and it came back badly, and there was a doctor after all, a soft-spoken woman with an unlicensed practice above a laundry, who asked no questions and took no money. Verity remembered almost none of it. She remembered fragments, the smell of bread, Ambrose Fenn's voice reading aloud, haltingly, from a newspaper that was 3 days old, a cold cloth on the back of her neck, and a chair by the window that was never empty. At any hour, she opened her eyes. In 19 days. On the 20th day, she woke up clear. She lay there for a while and worked out that it was afternoon, and that the fever was gone, and that she was hungry, which was a sensation she had not experienced in so long that it took her some time to identify. Emeric Corvo was sitting in the chair by the window with a book open on his knee. It was not the Green Ledger. It was a paperback with a cracked spine, and he was reading it, and he looked, in the flat gray afternoon light, in a plain shirt with his sleeves rolled and 2 days of beard on his jaw, like a man and not like a rumor. He looked up. "You are awake," he said. "I am starving." "Good." She pushed herself up on her elbows, and it hurt, and she did it anyway, and she looked at him. "Tell me," she said. So he told her. The second book was in his hands, 410 names. He had been going through it for 19 days, line by line, and he had a list now, and the list had addresses on it, and Merrick Vidra had spent the last fortnight driving from door to door in the worst streets in the city, knocking, handing over an envelope, and leaving. "Not a repayment," Corvo said. "I cannot repay it. Some are dead, some moved, and I will never find them. Some will not open the door to a man in a coat, and I do not blame them." "Then, what is in the envelopes?" "Everything that was taken from them," Corvo said, "plus everything it would have earned if it had not been." "That is not a small number," she said. "No, how not small?" Corvo told her. Verity lay back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling. "You dissolved collections," she said. "I dissolved collections. The whole arm, he said. "It is gone. It does not exist. I put 22 men out of work on Tuesday, and I will be feeling that for a year, and I do not care." "That is 20% of your house," Verity said. 26, said Corvo. She turned her head and looked at him. "You do not know that," she said. "Do you? You have never opened the book, so you do not actually know what any of it is worth. You are guessing. You have been guessing at your own accounts for 11 years, like a man guessing his own weight." Emeric Corvo looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up and went to the table and picked up something that had been sitting there, under a cloth, for some days. He put it on the bed. It was a ledger. It was new. It was bound in dark green cloth, and the pages were blank, and on the front, stamped in blue ink, low down in the corner where nobody had ever thought to put it before, were 2 crossed keys. Verity did not touch it. "No," she said. "You have not heard the offer. I do not need to hear it. I know what it is. A room in a good house, and a salary, and a title, and a man who will stand between me and the weather for the rest of my life. And I know exactly how that ends, Mr. Corvo, because I have spent 3 years standing in the corner of your dining room, watching it end." She looked at him. "I am not going to be kept," she said. "I am not offering to keep you," Corvo said. He sat down on the edge of the bed. I am offering you the book, he said. Not a job in the house. The book. Every dollar that comes into it and every dollar that goes out of it, and my name on nothing that you have not read first, and a door that locks on the inside. Verity stared at him. You would be the only person alive who could ruin me, he said. Which is, as far as I can tell, the only honest way for a man like me to be trusted by a woman like you. The room was very quiet. And if I say no, she said. Then you say no, Corvo said, and Merrick drives you to any address in this country, and you never see me again, and the envelopes go out on Thursday exactly as they are going out now. Because that is not a thing I did for you. That is a thing I should have done 11 years ago, and did not. He stood up. Take your time, he said. There is bread downstairs. And he was at the door, with his hand on the frame, when Verity Sorrel said, Wait. He stopped. She had her hand flat on the cover of the ledger, and she was pressing down on it slightly, the way you test whether a floor will hold you. The night I hit you, she said. You could have had me killed in that kitchen, and nobody in this city would ever have said a word about it. Nobody. And instead you asked me my name, and then you sent me a pair of shoes. She looked up. Why? Merrick Corvo stood in the doorway for a long time. Because I have been in that other room for 11 years, he said at last. Everybody in it agrees with me. Everybody in it tells me I am right. My own consigliere sat across a table from me for 11 years and told me I was right, while he opened up 410 people underneath the floorboards. He looked at his hands. And then a woman, I had never seen in my life, crossed my own kitchen and hit me in the face for something I had done, he said, in front of my men, knowing what I was. He met her eyes. I did not ask your name because I wanted to punish you, he said. I asked your name because in 20 years you were the first true thing in the building. Verity, Sorrel breathed out. She looked down at the blank green book under her hand. Then she said, I will need a desk. They gave her the room at the top of the house on Vestry Hill, the one with the tall window that looked down over the whole city. And the door had a bolt on the inside, and she was the only one who held the key. She kept the biscuit tin on the desk. She never explained it to anybody. And after a while nobody asked. The men of the house learned quickly. They learned that the woman on the top floor read everything and remembered everything, and that when she asked a question twice, it was already too late. And once a month, on the 15th, Merrick Corvo climbed the stairs to that room and knocked on a door he could not open, and waited to be let in, and sat down across the desk from her, and opened his own books. She never let him stop. That is what you build with a hand you were not afraid to raise. Verity Sorrel walked across a kitchen with nothing in her pockets and a hole in her shoe, and struck the most dangerous man in the city because an old man was crying and nobody else would move. She did not know who he was. And then she made him look at what his own name had been doing in the dark. If you like your heroines quiet, careful, and completely unwilling to be a number in somebody else's book, you are in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments the exact moment you knew Casimir Drac was finished. I will see you in the next one.